It's the Worth Knowing live stream on my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robison, and also on the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and I'm going to leave the preamble there because we have a very unusual live stream show today, and I want to jump right into it. Today's unusual because this is going to be a 15-minute sprint of a live stream. I'm so sorry to keep it so short. I want to give you your money's worth. I unfortunately have something that's come up that I can't move today. Our friend Cliff Schechter was going to try to jump on and carry the torch, but he's in the same boat. And then friend of the show, recent appearer on this show, Congressional candidate Fred Wellman, was also going to try to jump on and do some guest hosting. But he too has a number of obligations today, including running for Congress and the fact that it's Veterans Day. Fred is a veteran. And of course, that takes priority. And before getting into any of the discussion we're about to have about the shutdown, let me say thank you to all who have served. You're the reason that we get to have these kinds of discussions today, and we get to have a free and open society if we can keep it, and we appreciate you. And I'm going to exercise that freedom of debate and expression right now that you've secured for us for just a few minutes to talk about this deal that 8 Senate Democrats struck to end the government shutdown. I've been texting and calling friends and former colleagues for the last 24 hours. As many of you know, I spent more than a decade as a senior congressional staffer and campaign manager. I have a lot of friends still in that world or who are still in the campaign world. So it's on that basis of everything that I'm hearing and everything that I've written about over the last 5 weeks that I'm going to try to get to 3 basic questions today. First, what happened here? Why did they do this? Second, could they have actually done better? And I know that one seems obvious, but I want to put some shape to that. And finally, third, where are we going from here? And I really want to get to this third part because it's in our DNA as Democrats to get really dejected, down on ourselves. And I don't think we should. In fact, I think getting consumed by anger and depression and recriminations plays into the hands of the Trump MAGA authoritarians. Like I said, I'm going to try and do all of this in about 15 minutes, maybe like 13 left. I apologize up front to all of our amazing community in the chat. You know how much I love to get your comments up on screen, react and respond, but I'm doing this solo today. So just know that I appreciate you. I may be doing a little bit less of that today. And with that, I am going to try to get to those 3 things that I said I wanted to address about this. Let's start with first, what happened? Why this deal? I want to take a very quick step back. I know a lot of you know this, you know all this already, but let's just run down how we got here because I think it informs what ended up happening over the last few days. Now, I've written 2 articles about this in Newsweek and then reprinted on my Substack, Worth Knowing. That's worthknowing.substack.com. Please subscribe. Just became a bestseller. I'm really proud of that. So please help me keep the momentum going. As I wrote the day the shutdown started, the politics of this maneuver were against the Democrats at the outset, but they had to do it. They had to do it. They needed to show fight. This is not just what their base wants. This is what voters want. They needed to restore some faith in their own leadership and some alignment among the various factions of the party. But to be clear, there were always political problems here. Now, I laid out in that Newsweek piece, the one that came out the day the shutdown started, a substantial risk of 3 negative near-term outcomes. 1, losing the perception battle. 2, distracting from Donald Trump's economy-killing tariffs and the Epstein file cover-up, and handing Trump, number 3, and his hatchet man, OMB Director Russell Vought, near dictatorial power to shred the government even further. Now, the first risk is the one that I think was first and foremost on people's minds. The idea that we lose this perception battle. This might be a short-term loss for us. As political scientist Matt Glassman has pointed out, it's not true that Republicans always lose shutdown battles. They have frequently. But what he's shown is that actually it's the party that's trying to leverage the shutdown, like us in this case, that tends to lose the public opinion battle. Actually, he said always loses. Now, the second Newsweek piece I wrote a few weeks ago was, this is going better than we ever could have hoped for. And it was. The perception battle had been a draw in the initial few weeks. Polling consistently showed that voters blamed the parties equally or Republicans slightly more. And it also showed Donald Trump's approval rating falling significantly. Now, there are some wrinkles to that. And I know this is getting wonky. Oh, should we play our fun media sting for that? I think I will. We're going to do some numbers here. So let's do the numbers.
Nerd alert!
It was my understanding that there would be no math.
I don't even know what that means.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
Oh, I love doing those clips. That is really so much fun. So there are some wrinkles to the perception that Democrats were winning the shutdown. I think this is very important to understand. Polling showed that as much as Democrats were holding their own or winning the perception battle, voters didn't really understand why the shutdown was happening. Now, to be clear, there are some outliers here. Navigator Research, which is a Democratic-aligned polling firm, said, well, they did focus grouping and it seemed like voters were making the healthcare connection. But overall, across polling, it didn't seem like voters were really fully connecting the dots on healthcare yet. Maybe they would increasingly as these ACA premiums continued to spike as people were shopping during open enrollment. The other thing is that Donald Trump's approval rating actually went up initially. It was only a few weeks in. And this is something I have to kudos to Nate Silver for putting this together here. I don't always cite Nate Silver, but I will here. Donald Trump's numbers, I'm going to splash this up on the screen. They initially went up. Let me hide the comment here. At this point, people know that I'm going solo here, and this is a 15-minute sprint. So if you look at these numbers here during the shutdown, first few weeks, Trump was holding his own. And then he plummeted. Why? Well, Silver makes, I think, a pretty good case that the thing that changed was SNAP benefits. And actually, he shows this with some Google search term charts, which I also have up on the screen here. And, you see some spikes for searches for government shutdowns. Not much traffic on the ACA tie-in. I'm going to skip the upper right-hand corner. Not much traffic on flight delays. Not much traffic, the spike, one-day spike on the No Kings protests. But look at the SNAP numbers. And again, this doesn't necessarily prove the case, but it's suggestive. It's very suggestive. And so we had this ugly situation in recent weeks. SNAP payments, 42 million Americans going without food while Donald Trump is throwing great Gatsby parties in his gilded Mar-a-Lago lounge. It was ugly. It was obscene. So that's the context here. That's what begs the question, why do this deal right now? And look, everything I'm about to say here, I'm going to run through this quickly. I'm not justifying any of this. I just want to pass on to you what I've heard, what the thinking was from the insiders I've talked. I'm texting with a former Senate staffer right now. I'm actually getting live texts. I'm getting inputs here, including some behind the scenes, on background, off the record, whatever you want to call it, with a current U.S. senator. So here's the thinking. According to these contacts, there was huge concern that if holiday travel was a disaster, and if there was widespread economic fallout, and if this SNAP situation where the judge had ordered the Trump administration to pay benefits, but it wasn't clear how far that authority would extend. So if people were beginning to go without food, if the pain point was increasing, there was concern that the situation could shift very, very quickly, and that Democrats would start to shoulder the blame. Again, not justifying. I'm not justifying. I'm just passing along what the thinking is. I'm going to actually read here. This is the way I summarized it to one Senate contact of mine. I said, the real risk that if Thanksgiving was a travel disaster and stories about people going without food started piling up, Democrats, the sense that they're winning the shutdown could evaporate rapidly. Is that part of it? And this friend said, that's more than part of it. It's pretty much it. Trump said clearly no to any ACA negotiations, That locked the Republicans in. So at that point, you're not getting any further wins. And so the sense from Democrats was that this was our high point on public perceptions, on everything we were going to get out of this shutdown. And since there had been a bright line of we're not going to negotiate any further during a shutdown, if we end the shutdown first, then we'll have maximized the gain we can get. If we go further and the pain on working people increases, everything could boomerang on us in a matter of days, and it'll be too late. It'll be too late to rescue the situation. At that point, Republicans will have even less incentive to do a deal because things will be going south on Democrats. Now, look. Well, one more quick thing. This is a summary. Again, I'm getting this from inside the dome. The case that they're bandying about under the dome among the Dems is, look, we got some big appropriations bills done, which means we've locked the Trump administration in, and it limits the amount of skullduggery they can do. And remember, they've withheld $400 billion of funding. So they think that's important. We're going to get this ACA vote, and that's going to put the Republicans right back on their heels on healthcare. And look, we've elevated this issue. We've put it on the issue agenda. And so if we get the ACA win on this vote, that's huge. The appropriations bills are a win. And if they screw us on all of this, they're going to lose. That was the thinking. Now, here's the problem. Look at the reaction that's happening in the chats. And again, I apologize that I can't splash this up on the screen. But you know how you're feeling. I know how I'm feeling. It's not just the base. It's not just progressives. People feel like this was a cave-in. I get that there was no end game from the start. There was no end game here. But people are not feeling it. And I warned in my second Newsweek article about this, that if Democrats caved and people didn't connect to the reason why, that we would squander much of the credibility that we've earned. Well, we folded. The credibility is squandered. And look, I'm already running up against the limits of the time that I have today. I'm so sorry for this. I would love to go on much longer. But let me hit two final points, because I want to talk about what could they have done better. Now, some people are saying, well, just don't do fucking anything, right? Like, just keep holding out. I'm not sure how I'm still thinking about that one. That could be right. I will just say that the risks are real. The pain that people are feeling out there is real. And, there is a risk factor here. Now, look, this is the authoritarian move. As my recent guest, Stanford political scientist Adam Bonica and Substacker had pointed out, like, this is the authoritarian move. You amp up the pain until the opposition makes a deal to get the pain to stop. I'm just saying that it's hard. But my thinking is one change I would have really wanted to push, I'd like to push these senators on, is could you have gotten this ACA vote next week instead of in a month? Could you have had the immediacy of that and the instant feedback of, are Republicans going to screw us? And are they going to follow through? Do they feel the pain point about these ACA premiums? I think that would have created a psychological connection, at least for me, to we have gotten something. We've kept the pressure on this healthcare issue in some way. That would have been an improvement for me. But let's close out on this, because I went on too long on the first part. I think there's a good chance that time is going to heal this wound. It sucks. I'm angry right now. But don't forget that a week ago, we won big. We won by pivoting across Mamdani and Sherrill and Spanberger, across progressives and moderates, to an affordability message. We are on the message that's a winning message, that's uniting Americans, that's uniting our party. And I just wrote this huge piece, worthknowing.substack.com, about, do we need to moderate? And I don't want to spoil it. I want people to read it. But my conclusion is, well, yes, we have to address our weak points as a party, but we need the energy that comes from our progressive and populist portions of our base. We can't rob Peter to pay Paul. We can't shiv our allies if we're moving in a more moderate direction on a handful of issues. So don't forget that Donald Trump's problems are as massive and as motivating as ever. Yes, this is going to be an ugly winter of discontent, but we are on the right path. And if we can gut our way through this difficult time, we can limit the recriminations. Let's just remember, we're on the same team here. We're fighting for the survival of the republic. I think we can get through this. As much as I think this was a blunder, I think we can get through this. And I want to thank everyone so much for being on for this micro edition of the Worth Knowing live stream. I'll be back very soon. I'll be back next week. Exciting stuff coming up. Worthknowing.substack.com. Thank you to all of our veterans. Thank you, truly. And stay safe, be well. I'll see you soon.